What is going on, guys? We are finally here at the UFC Freedom 250 fight card taking place on the White House this Sunday, not Saturday, Sunday, June 14th. And I am excited to break down these fights for you. Look, regardless of your political views, if you're for the current presidential campaign, if you're not, I think we could all put that to the side and just enjoy these fights. I'm excited to break them down. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And let's jump straight into the first fight of the night. First up, we got Diego Lopes taking on Steve Garcia. This is a nasty opening fight. Imagine if this was just, a regular fight card and this was the opening prelim fight. I think we all would enjoy this. I know a lot of people have been saying this fight card didn't really live up to the expectations. I still think it's a pretty fun fight card. Diego Lopes taking on Steve Garcia. I really like Steve Garcia in this matchup, and I will be honest, I have to take off this wig because it is squeezing my brain. So before I get into that, let me go ahead and take this off. We can finally breathe now that my brain has some air. Let's get into the breakdown. I like Steve Garcia in this matchup. Look, Diego Lopes, yes, he's had his title opportunities up against Volkanovski. He obviously came up short in both of those matchups. Yes, he did managed to drop Volk a handful of times. But other than that, he has not evolved since his debut in the UFC. And you look at, where he's come from, he had that short notice step in against Mozart. Of course, he went on to knock out Pat Sabatini, Sadiq Youssef. He got that win over Dan Ige. Took it on like 45 minutes notice. Brian Ortega, the Gene Silva knockout is probably his most impressive win in his UFC career. In that Diego Lopes fight, the Diego versus Volkanovski fight, both of them, we saw Diego having a really, really hard time cutting off the octagon against Volk. And Volk was really allowed to maneuver, jab, low kick his way to a decision. Obviously, he also, caught Diego a handful of times. He had some wrestling success as well. And, Diego does have some grappling credentials, but I think Steve Garcia is actually a bad matchup for him. When we look at like the power for power, I actually think Steve Garcia hits a lot cleaner than Diego Lopes. I think Diego has more so clubbing power, whereas Steve Garcia, if you take a clean shot from him, there hasn't been many opponents who have been able to withstand it. You go through Steve Garcia's, record, and yes, they're not the most amazing wins, but he's doing exactly what he needs to do. Since he dropped, from 155, he's looked pretty incredible. The Shailin Nordembeka finish, the uppercut to the body where he did get dropped early in that matchup, TKO over Melky Costa, which is starting to age really well. I know he lost to Arnold Allen, but Arnold Allen is still a pretty solid featherweight contender. Sumo Choi knockout, first round knockout. Kyle Nelson, first round knockout. He got that unanimous decision win over Kelvin Cater. And then most recently, he knocked out David Onama, who I think is a lot more technical than Diego Lopes, but he also has some conditioning issues as well, which is why we ended up going with Steve Garcia in that matchup. If I were to line this fight, I think I would have Steve Garcia closer to maybe like a plus, maybe plus 130, plus 120, somewhere around there. The line actually opened a bit wider. I believe Steve was somewhere around plus 200 odds. And you see there's been some love on the side of Steve Garcia. I actually took a stab on Steve Garcia earlier, I want to say about 2 weeks ago now, while the odds were still around the range where I got him. But I like Steve Garcia in this matchup, man. Like I said, I think the power is a lot better. He is a southpaw as well, and I haven't seen Diego Lopes, fare well against any southpaws. Honestly, he hasn't really fought one in the UFC, but John Silva was switching stances in their matchup, and he did have success against Diego Lopes. He was straight down the line, throwing front kicks down the middle. He was catching him with that jab pretty well, and Diego, he is a guy who is willing to take, 2 to 3 shots to land his own. If you look at their, strike differential, Diego has a negative strike differential. He sits about 3.8, strikes landed per minute, where he's absorbing about 4.5. Whereas on the other side, Steve is dishing out a lot of punishment, 5.6 strikes landed per minute, and he's only absorbing 2.5. The grappling could definitely make this fight interesting, but I like Steve Garcia's takedown defense, and I like that he never settles in positions. If you go back and you look at that Mercuzio Costa fight, yes, it was a southpaw versus southpaw, and they ended up having pretty much a wrestling matchup up until those nasty elbows from Steve Garcia. Steve was never allowing Melky to throw his hooks in, and we know Melky is actually a pretty solid grappler. We've seen him snatch up submissions from bottom, you know, with his offensive wrestling as well. And Steve Garcia really was making him work in that first round up against the cage. Never allowed him to, you know, use his hooks. Didn't even fall for the trips that Melky was utilizing. And I know Diego has been training with Oklahoma State primarily for this camp. But, you know, I've been watching his, what do you call them? Like, not fight companions, but, you know, his journey to the White House, basically. And he's been training heavy in Oklahoma State, the wrestling room specifically. And I don't know how much that's going to help him here. If he plans on wrestling Steve Garcia, I feel as though Steve Garcia's takedown defense is actually going to hold up. And I like how Steve Garcia is always the guy that's moving forward. If you look at Diego Lopez's fights, even in the John Silva fight, you know, yes, he had that spinning elbow knockout. Majority of the time, he was on the back foot. When Diego is landing his shots, it's not really a counter. You know, he's more so blitzing in and landing 2 to 3 shots at a time. Whereas I think he's going to have a hard time doing that against Steve Garcia, who shoots a really nasty jab. He's got good low kicks, and he's always moving. You know, he rips, you know, he slips and rips really good shots. I like the head movement from Steve Garcia, and I think he's just a lot more accurate than Diego. So I think this fight actually surprises a lot of people. I'm looking at the Topology picks right now, and 83% are on Diego Lopez. I'm not really blown away by a Diego Lopez pick at this point. I really feel as though the value's on the dog. I like Steve Garcia a lot. You know, I've been a fan of Diego Lopez, but if we're being honest, he's never really evolved since he's made his debut into the UFC. And now he's also talking about moving up to 155 because of how, you know, he's been unsuccessful challenging for the title. And I just think, you know, Steve Garcia is a guy who's hungry to get to to get the 145 chip. I know he is 34 years old, but he's still looking, you know, young, fresh, hasn't really taken a lot of damage. I think he's going to get the better of Diego Lopez. I wouldn't be surprised if both of these guys, you know, land a knockdown. But I would actually lean towards Steve Garcia, maybe even getting a stoppage in this fight. I know Diego has a pretty solid chin, but Steve Garcia, like I said, he's pretty accurate. He's more so the guy that's going to be on the forward pressure. Diego, you know, since the second Volk fight, we've really just seen him relegated to, you know, low kicks and a decent jab here and there. And he's pretty, I'm not going to say he's hesitant, but he's not as gung-ho with particular matchups like we've seen him in the past. Like, you go back, you look at the Sadiq Yusuf fight, you know, he just blitzed him in the pocket. Brian Ortega blitzed him in the pocket. Pat Sabatini caught him with a, you know, not really a fluky shot, but we've seen Pat Sabatini's chin hold up since that matchup. So I don't know. I'm not really high on Diego Lopez in this spot. If he wins, he wins, but I think the value is actually on the dog. I do have, you know, a straight bet on Steve Garcia, and I think he can win this fight, you know, decision or maybe a knockout. I think Steve Garcia is the more accurate fighter. I think he has the better power, and I think, you know, him being a southpaw is going to throw Diego Lopez off quite frequently. So, yeah, I like the Mean Machine to get it cracking. I think America gets, you know, we're gonna go 1-0 to open up the fight card. Give me the Mean Machine to win this fight, TKO or decision. Next up, we got Bo Nickal taking on Kyle Daukaus, the All-American wrestler Bo Nickal, who did get somewhat exposed. You know, that loss doesn't really age as bad, but I know RDR did quit, you know, in his fight against Brendan Allen. But I'm going to slightly lean Bo Nickal here. I don't think we should be looking at his money line. I think that is way too wide, especially seeing how dangerous Kyle Daukaus is. And, you know, since Kyle Daukaus has made his return to the UFC, I've been on the train. I was one of the only people that picked him to knock out Michel Pereira, and he knocked him out in 6 seconds. Now, I know that win doesn't really age particularly well. Michel did just pick up a win against Zach Reese, but he also lost to, I can't remember if that was before the Boost fight or right after. But I know Michel lost 2 fights in a row, I believe. The Kyle Daukaus fight might have been the second fight. Bo Nickal looked spectacular against Rodolfo Vieira, but we just saw Rodolfo Vieira lose to Eric McConical. I know he knocked him out in the 3rd round, but Rodolfo Vieira, if you're not familiar with his style, all he has is a jab and a couple takedown attempts. Obviously, he wasn't going to be able to take down Bo Nickal because of the wrestling. Bo Nickal was definitely the better wrestler, so he was really just relegated to a jab, and Bo Nickal was able to let his hands fly. In this matchup, Kyle Daukaus is going to be the better striker. This is why I'm not super confident on the Bo side. He is going to be the better striker, and he also has a threat of jiu-jitsu. If you're not familiar, Kyle Daukaus, his nickname is the Dark Knight. He loves front chokes. He has been able to lock up a choke in his most recent fight against GM3. And obviously, we've seen the power in his hands that he's been, reinventing himself since he's made his comeback, from the CFFC. Bo Nickal's going to have to mind his P's and Q's on the feet. I think both guys are going to respect the power coming back from each other. Now, I know Bo Nickel can relegate where this fight takes place because of his wrestling. He's definitely going to be the better wrestler here. But like I said, if you look back at his fight with Paul Craig, the threat of the jiu-jitsu definitely kept Bo safe in that department. He didn't shoot any takedowns. He stayed on the feet with Paul Craig. And yes, he outlanded him, landed, a couple better shots, but Paul Craig really isn't that good of a striker. And even in the RDR fight, when he went for, his one takedown attempt, RDR was able to reverse him. RDR also has that weird kind of build similar to a Kyle Daukaus. I don't think Kyle Daukaus is as strong as RDR, but he definitely will let his hands go a lot cleaner than RDR. So like I said, I think Bo Nickal's definitely going to have to be safe in the pocket with Kyle Daukaus. I think his 1-2s down the middle are pretty solid. I know Bo has been seeming as though he's super confident in himself, which he should be, but I think this is a matchup where, we should look at the dog in this one. I think Kyle Daukaus is definitely live. I'm not going to say Bo Nickal's chinny or anything like that. Obviously, he got stopped to the body, but, Kyle Daukaus could definitely replicate some of the same success that RDR had. And I don't think Bo Nickal's just going to run away with this fight. I think it could definitely be close. I think Kyle Daukaus can definitely outstrike him. I think he's going to land the cleaner shots, and Bo Nickal's might be forced to take a bad shot. And if he does, Kyle Daukaus definitely has the threat of the front submissions, in his repertoire. So I think the value is definitely on the dog. I like Kyle Daukaus. I think it's going to be a close fight with Bo Nickal having the wrestling advantage. I will slightly lean Bo to win by decision, but I could definitely see a split decision in this matchup. I don't think Bo is going to knock Kyle Daukaus out. I know he has been finished, in the past to Eric Anders, and I believe Roman Dolidze finished him, and I want to say somebody else if I'm not mistaken, but no, just those two guys, Roman Dolidze and Eric Anders, both TKO back in 2022. But like I said, Kyle Daukaus has put together 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fights in a row where he's been getting stoppages as well. I think we're gonna have to respect the hands of Kyle Daukaus, especially here. Like I said, I do think he's the better striker, but I'll lean Bo Nickal via split decision, excuse me. Next up, we got the Timo version of Conor McGregor for Michael Chandler. He is getting a similar stylistic matchup that he was asking for. We all know Michael Chandler has been waiting for that Conor McGregor fight. It was scheduled one point last summer. Obviously, Conor had to pull out. I believe it was like a pinky toe injury or something like that. But the UFC kind of tried to give him a similar matchup, and now he's taking on Mauricio Ruffi, who looked spectacular in that knockout win over Rafael Fiziev. And one thing that I think is definitely going to stand out in this matchup is going to be the jab. Michael Chandler, look, we've said time and time again, if this guy does that, if this guy does this, if this guy does that, he can win. But Michael Chandler is not here to win. He's honestly just here to entertain. Now, I know he is a proud American. He is going to be fighting on the White House, so maybe he takes this fight a little more serious. But I think Rufy is going to knock him out inside of 2 rounds. If Chandler wrestles, that would be the path to victory against Rufy. But I like that Rufy has been taking time to train with Alexander Volkanovski. I know him and Gene Silva fell out because there's a slight beef going on between the Fighting Nerds, something like that. But Rufy putting in the work to sharpen up his skill set definitely is going to be a factor in this matchup, because if he's able to defend the takedowns of Chandler, we've seen Chandler slow down over time, in these rounds, and he comes out pretty heavy. He will, dart across the cage, try to look for his overhands. He throws heavy hands, of course, but Rufy, too slick on the feet. His head movement is really good. The tracking that he has with that jab, that's the biggest thing that we saw in that Rafael Fiziev fight. He was landing double jabs every time that he put him out there. And if Chandler does not mind his P's and Q's, he's definitely going to get chinned here. I think Rufy gets a knockout. I think it comes maybe at the end of the first round, but definitely inside of 2 rounds in my opinion. Rufy makes high reads. I don't think Chandler is going to, finally put it together at 40 years old, which is also another factor, and fight smart. We know Chandler wants to come out here. He wants to entertain. I think he's going to get flatline KO, and I think we could definitely see Michael Chandler put the gloves up. He's been taking a lot of damage over the years. Obviously, a year ago, which also is another thing. He got knocked out. TKO stoppage via Paddy Pimblett right before that. Charles Oliveira dominated him. He had a little bit of success with that slam in the 5th round. Right before that, he was submitted by Dustin Poirier. Obviously, he got that win over Tony Ferguson, and Justin Gaethje also beat him unanimous decision. But the common theme in all of those fights, other than the Tony Ferguson fight, was Chandler taking a lot of damage. Dropped, multiple times. Dustin Poirier dropped him into that submission. Charles Oliveira rocked him multiple times. It also finished him in their first matchup via TKO. Chandler, like I said, he's going to be here to entertain. RUFFY, superior striker, definitely has, a bit of a cardio issue if you're able to push the wrestling with him. We saw that in the BSD fight, but I don't think Chandler has the physicality of BSD. He is, I'm not going to say he's undersized, but he is a shorter guy. He's definitely strong as a bull, but makes a lot of mistakes far too often to trust him as an underdog here. So I really like Mauricio RUFFY. I think he gets it done inside of 2 rounds. I'm more so leaning the first round TKO, and maybe we see Michael Chandler put the gloves down on the White House lawn. That's definitely how I see, his career playing out. And what better of a spotlight to do it on? I don't think he's going to win this fight. If he does, that would be even more incredible. But I think RUFFY's probably going to knock him out in the first round, and we get a Michael Chandler retirement on the White House lawn. So give me RUFFY, TKO, round 1. Next up, we got Derek Lewis, the Black Beast, taking on Josh HOKIT. I got to go with Josh HOKIT. I feel as though this is clear as day. I'm honestly surprised the odds aren't wider. Josh HOKIT, in my opinion, should probably be like a -5 to 600 favorite in the spot. Derek Lewis, we cannot trust him. You go back, you look at his fight against Waldo Cortez Acosta. He threw maybe 2 punches, got caught with a counter jab. Really wasn't even that hard, fell to the ground and gave up. Now, I know he did say there was something going on with the weight cut or something like that. I think he said he rehydrated way too much, put on like an extra 20 pounds after his weight cut, and that's what led to that performance. But it's not like we've never seen Derek Lewis look like that before. Even in the Talison Teixeira fight, he kind of got lucky, stepped on Talison's foot and landed that punch. But even that knockout isn't impressive. Talison just got starched by Sergey Pavlovich. Talison has been terrible since, even prior to that Derek Lewis fight. He's just been, able to get his knockouts over low-level competition. Now, Derek Lewis obviously has, the power advantage, but similar to the Curtis Blades fight, man, Josh HOKIT's speed, his pressure is going to be far too much for Derek Lewis. He's going to put Derek Lewis on the back foot the entire time. Now, he doesn't need to mind, his P's and Q's. Like I said, Lewis does have the power. And if he's swinging and banging with Derek Lewis, that's not a guy that you would like to do that with. But we saw HOKIT be able to take some solid shots from Curtis Blades, and we saw how he was able to drop a full-size heavyweight in Curtis Blades. I think he's going to be able to do that without any problems here against Derek Lewis. The speed is just going to be far too much. Derek definitely needs Josh HOKIT to sit in front of him and trade with him, but I think Josh HOKIT, he seems to be taking his fight a lot more seriously. And, I think that Curtis Blades fight was the coming out party for him to basically blow his character up. I think he's going to take this fight a lot more serious. He's going to do exactly what he needs to do. And obviously, he has a clear advantage in the wrestling. If he takes Derek Lewis down, Derek Lewis is not getting back up. And I can definitely see a ground and pound stoppage for Josh HOKIT. So like I said, I think Josh HOKIT should be a -600 favorite here. I don't think Derek Lewis is going to win. I don't think he's going to land that shot. Gas tank definitely favors Josh HOKIT. The speed definitely favors Josh HOKIT. The wrestling definitely favors Josh HOKIT. And I see a mauling from Josh HOKIT over Derek Lewis. He got this fight in the middle of his last fight. And, Derek Lewis just so happened to accept it. I think he's going to smother Derek Lewis. I think he's going to put him out. Round 1, round 2, TKO coming for Josh HOKIT. Featured fighter tonight, we got Sean O'Malley taking on Amin Zahabi, and I got to go with the Sugar Show here. I think this is a perfect spot for him to get the highlight reel TKO that we have been waiting almost 3 years for. Obviously, his last knockout win was against Aljamain Sterling. Now he's taking on Amin Zahabi, who I think is probably the worst fighter that he's fought since, since he won the belt. Sean O'Malley, say what you want. I know he looked bad against Merab Dvalishvili, obviously losing by submission, almost a year ago. But Song Yadong, Merab twice, Marlon Vera, Aljamain Sterling, and Petr Yan. Way higher level of competition than Amin Zahabi has ever even seen, and higher level than Amin Zahabi. Amin Zahabi just went split decision with Marlon Vera. Sugar obviously just dominated Marlon Vera in his first title defense. Now, as a common opponent, MMA math doesn't always work, but I think Zahabi is sort of like a pressure merchant, and he kind of takes about a round and some change to get his style going. He will settle into that pace later into the first round. You can see it in that Jose Aldo fight. You can see it in the Marlon Vera fight as well. Didn't really get start getting going later into that. You know, the ending sequence of the first round and into the second. But common thing for Amin Zahabi in both of those fights was he was dropped by clean, you know, straight shots. Jose Aldo dropped him with a jab, and he also, you know, damn near head kicked him into oblivion. And Marlon Vera also dropped him with a jab as well. Sean O'Malley, if you're not familiar, clean, straight shots down the middle. That's exactly how he won the belt. I think he will be able to find clean, straight shots on Amin Zahabi. That knee down the center is also another weapon that I saw Amin Zahabi struggle with. Marlon Vera nearly caught him with it a couple of times, and Jose Aldo was able to find success. But the thing that Sean O'Malley has that Marlon Vera and Jose Aldo don't have is the length. Sean O'Malley is a pretty tall bantamweight, standing at 5'11", and he has really long limbs. So I think he will be able to find those knees. We saw it against Chito Vera. I think he's definitely going to be able to pull it out here. If he finds a knockout in this matchup, I think it's going to be the first 2 rounds. It's definitely going to have to be before Zahabi gets rolling downhill because, you know, all credit to him. He's been able to put together, what, a 7-fight, 8-fight win streak. When he gets the ball rolling, he has pretty solid, pretty solid recoverability, and he will put a pressure on these guys that make them uncomfortable. And he will, you know, get his Philly shell going, similar to, you know, a Sean Strickland, but Zahabi, like I said, he's pretty open down the middle, and I think the counters are going to be there for Sean O'Malley. I think a lot of pull counters are definitely going to be there for Sean. And for Zahabi to win this fight, he's definitely going to have to limit the movement for Sean O'Malley. We saw Song Yadong have a little bit of success in that second round against Sean. He incorporated some wrestling and heavy low kicks, but Zahabi doesn't throw with the explosiveness of a Song Yadong, in my opinion. He's more so ticky-tacky, and when he wants to let his hands go, you know, he'll throw a wild shot here and there. But Song Yadong definitely the cleaner, more explosive striker than Zahabi, and Sean O'Malley was able to pick apart him for, you know, 2 out of those 3 rounds. I know a lot of people say that fight was somewhat debatable, but I thought it was a clear 29-28 for Sean O'Malley. Another weapon that Sean O'Malley has in this matchup is definitely going to be the feints. I think he's going to have Zahabi reacting to a lot of things in this matchup. And, you know, the elusiveness from Sean O'Malley is just going to be a far too much, in my opinion. I think he could stab from the outside and dip his toe into the water when he wants to let, you know, a clean shot go. He was catching Song Yadong with some pretty nasty knees, also catching with some long hooks. I think he could replicate the same thing here. I do think, like I said, if he gets the knockout, it has to be early because Zahabi will turn the pressure on later. And we've seen Sean O'Malley not gas, but definitely slow down when fighters are still there and putting, you know, the pressure on him. Song Yadong had a little bit of success. Marlon Vera, you know, ripped him to the body late in their matchup. And I believe, was it the Petr Yan matchup? I think it was Petr Yan who was able to stay in his face, you know, for their 3 round. And, you know, ultimately he clipped Sean as well. They were able to, you know, back Sean up and have him not necessarily gas, but definitely put in a presence on Sean O'Malley. So Zahabi's going to have to rip the low kicks. He's going to have to incorporate some wrestling and put the pressure on Sean O'Malley. But I think Sean's going to be able to skate on the outside. I think he's going to be able to dip his toe into the water, let some really good shots go when he chooses to. And one thing that I noticed today, Sean O'Malley has been training with, you know, a wet mat. If you don't know, this fight is going to be outside. So I actually like that Sean O'Malley is putting that into his training camp. You know, high IQ right there, preparing for the worst because there is a possibility of rain. So if Sean's able to, you know, do it in the training room, he'll be able to do it come fight night. So I like that Sean O'Malley is incorporating that. Definitely wants to get back to that title. And I think a stoppage here will definitely put him in the mix of another title shot. And we'll get a rematch, Sean O'Malley versus Petr Yan, coming hopefully at the end of the year. I think Sean O'Malley gets it done TKO early. If not, if it gets past, you know, the second half of the second round, and give me Sean O'Malley by decision. Co-main event of the evening. In this fight, I have been going back and forth. As you guys can see by the odds, it's damn near a coin flip. Ciryl Gane taking on Alex Poatan Pereira for, well, Alex is going for three-time or three-division champion, one of the only fighters to ever even challenge for a feat of that. And Ciryl Gane going for what, his third interim title fight, second interim title, or excuse me, yeah, third interim title fight. Derek Lewis, no, this is his fourth crack at gold. I stand corrected. Fought Derek Lewis for the interim, fought Francis Ngannou for the undisputed, and then he fought Tom Aspinall for the undisputed, and he fought John Jones for undisputed, right? Yeah, no. That was I think Sarah has fought a lot of championship fights. Alex Poatan Pereira has fought a lot of championship fights, but I am going to go with Poatan. I have picked against Poatan in the past, and it bit me in the ass. His loss to Magomed Ankalaev in the rematch. You know, I flipped those picks. I picked Alex in the first one, and I picked Magomed in the second one, and we saw that there definitely was an issue with him in the first one because he came out that second fight, stormed across the octagon, smacked him, sat him down, got him out of there. Now, I think this is a fight where I know Ciryl Gane is known as one of the slickest and most elusive heavyweights, you know, of all time, but we got to remember Poatan has been in there with Israel Adesanya, who let's kind of be honest, you know, Ciryl Gane and Izzy do have similar styles. I would say neither one of them are incredible wrestlers. Both of them have really good head movement. I think Izzy is a little better, but both of them have some mechanics that need some fixing. And I think Ciryl Gane, you know, he's not super experienced. Both of these guys have what, 15, 16 fights a piece, but Ciryl Gane is more so a finished product. And looking at, you know, the country that he comes from, France, we just got burnt by a French guy. If you know, watch my last picks, I can't trust another Frenchman. Ciryl Gane, I think he's going to lose. Now, I will say he does a lot of unnecessary movements. Like he will pull a shot and then he'll like duck under and then he'll add another, you know, elusive move that kind of puts him into trouble. And it's like an overcorrection. And I think Alex Pereira is a guy that you don't need to overcorrect, you know, on your movements with. And I think Poatan is the better striker, honestly. I know Ciryl Gane does a lot of flashy movements, but Poatan is so conservative with his shots that it doesn't really take a lot for him to be effective. And we've seen that throughout his career. You know, he's been able to knock out, you know, some of the best in the UFC. Obviously, he knocked out Izzy in the first one. Obviously, he got coded. You know, in the second one, he was able to knock out Yuri Prohashka, you know what, twice, knocked out Jamal Hill. The Khalil Roundtree performance was spectacular, and obviously knocked out Magomed Ankalaev. Now, if Ciryl fights out of southpaw, it will give Poatan some issues, but we saw he was able to still utilize that low kick on Ankalaev. He was able to use it on Izzy in that first matchup as well, and that's what ended up leading to, you know, the stoppage. Now, if Ciryl is going to be on the outside, you know, the entire fight, he will dip his toe into the water at times, and the overcorrection that I was speaking to, he'll pull straight back, and he puts himself on the cage, you know, far too often. You look at the Tai Tuivasa fight, you know, he was able to get out of range from that first boxing combination that Tai was able to throw, and Tai was able to just find him, you know, with a straight right hand. Ciryl will pull out with that long guard, but his chin is super available. Poatan is a guy that you don't want to leave your chin out to, obviously, and he has power in both of his hands. I think Alex is going to be able to use the low kicks here, either stance that Ciryl comes out in, and he's going to be able to keep Ciryl in front of him. Ciryl, I don't think he has a better gas tank either. I think Poatan's gas is actually pretty solid, and him moving up to heavyweight is just going to be able to allow him to, you know, be a lot more free, in my opinion. You know, he was a guy that should have never been cutting down to 185 for, you know, at the time in his career that he was, and he still was able to, you know, go 5 rounds with Izzy, knock him out, went up to 205, was showing that he was able to go, you know, 5 rounds with Magomed Ankalaev, still showing that he was able to knockout guys up at that weight class. I think he's going to be able to knock out Cyril Gane here. It's going to be a high level cat and mouse fight for as long as it goes, similar to the first Israel, excuse me, the first Israel Adesanya fight. But Alex is able to shrink the cage with his presence alone. I think he's going to be able to do that against Cyril Gane. I know Cyril looked pretty good up against Tom Aspinall, but Tom Aspinall is not the level of striker that Poatan is. Tom Aspinall, he's explosive, he is a little wild, and he's been able to get that off on slower heavyweights. Poatan is a guy who's been being able to track down guys that are a little faster than him, that are slicker than him, and definitely he has the power to translate up to 265. So I think there's bad habits on the side of Cyril. There's definitely bad habits on the side of Poatan. You can speak about his boxing defense. He definitely leaves his guard out low, and Cyril does have some power. Don't get me wrong, but Poatan has been able to use that style to his advantage up until this point. I don't think Cyril Gane is a fighter that he's never seen before. He's had a whole career in kickboxing prior to coming over to MMA, and I know Cyril Gane has been thinking about wrestling here, but I actually think Poatan will be able to stuff the takedowns fairly easily. If you look at the fight, against that Cyril Gane had up against Alexander Volkov, he was reversed multiple times there. He was on his back multiple times, and Volkov was able to, even look for submission attempts. And I know Volkov is definitely a better MMA fighter than Poatan, but just showing you that Cyril Gane isn't that high level of a wrestler, like the way that he's speaking it up to be. So I think Poatan will be able to defend the takedowns. We saw he was never taken down up against Magomed Ankalaev, who was, hoisted as the best wrestler that he's fought. I think Poatan has this fight in the bag. Now, like I said, it is going to be a high level cat and mouse type of matchup for as long as it lasts. But I think Alex will be able to deflect a lot of shots with that guard that he uses, and he is a guy that is determined. When he is determined, I don't think there's anybody on the planet that could possibly stop him. Maybe John Jones, but not the John Jones that we saw against Stipe. You look at Alex, like I said, in that Khalil fight. My God, absolute cinema. We saw the switch that he was able to hit in that second Ankalaev fight. I don't think that is a guy that Cyril Gane should be playing around with. Cyril getting dropped by Ty, getting rocked by Volkov multiple times. He's going to have to stay perfect for the entire night, and I don't think you're going to be able to do that with Poatan Pereira. We saw Izzy do that for 4 rounds. The 5th round, obviously, he got caught. Cyril will make a mistake, and I think Poatan will be able to capitalize on it. Give me Alex Poatan Pereira to win this fight by knockout. And finally, we got the main event of the evening. We have the All-American, the highlight, Justin Gaethje taking on the living, breathing embodiment of lightweight GOAT, Ilia El Matador Topuria. My lord, what a fight. Ilia Topuria knockout, okay? That's the breakdown. Ilia Topuria is going to knock out Justin Gaethje. Justin does a lot of bad habits. He has a lot of bad habits in the octagon. I'm going to pull up a photo that I was going to tweet out later this week. But there's this ducking action, and you guys can see it right here, that Justin does far too often in all of his fights, right? He'll come in kind of square in the pocket, and he dips to the right. Paddy Pimblett was able to crack him with uppercuts. He was able to crack him with high kicks in those sequences. Ilia Topuria is a guy who studies his opponents to a T. Every time that Justin dips, I think he's going to get caught with a shot, probably a straight down the middle or even a short choppy uppercut. But Justin, don't get me wrong, he's definitely he is the highlight. He's going to bring some high energy to the octagon. But Ilia Topuria is a guy who, if you make the smallest mistake, your life is going to flash before your eyes. We saw him knock out the GOAT, Alexander Volkanovski. We saw him knock out my GOAT, Charles Oliveira. We saw him knock out Max Holloway, who actually had a lot of success in those 3 rounds that they faced off. But Justin is a guy who, he throws a lot of chaos at you. He will definitely overswing at times. He is too aggressive at times. And don't get me wrong, he could definitely crack. But Ilia, that style that he uses, the bladed, boxing stance that he has, he's able to dip in, dip out, pull out, roll with shots pretty well. His jab is money. He's got obviously big power. I think the counters are going to be on display. I think it's going to be a counter shot that rocks Justin Gaethje, and I think Justin Gaethje is gonna go cold. I don't think it's gonna be a TKO. I think he's gonna go cold, and it's gonna be rough for the country. But Ilia Topuria is not a guy that should be messed around with, and we got an Ilia fresh after his divorce. I don't really speak on the fighters' personal lives and all that, but he's got that divorce all cleaned up. I think this is just a terrible stylistic matchup for Justin Gaethje. I would love to root for him. He's definitely a fan favorite, but my God, Justin's path, he's gonna have to rip that low kick, and even him doing that, we've seen him be able to do it from awkward angles, but him doing that, throwing naked low kicks against Ilia Topuria is just a recipe to get countered. And Ilia definitely has power in the straight shots. He's got power in his hooks, and he's super precise, super conservative with his shots. It's just a bad matchup, man. And I just see Ilia knocking him out inside of 2 rounds. If it extends, he definitely has, the power late into fights. He can knock you out for as long as the fight goes on, but I don't see Justin having a lot of success in this matchup. He will get into the pocket and stay there too long at times. Like I said, that dip in motion that I don't think a lot of people have picked up on. It's a bad habit that he has. He did it a lot, excuse me, versus Tony. He did it a lot versus, you didn't really see it in the Dustin Poirier fight. Fiziev was able to capitalize on it a couple of times. Max Holloway, that's how he landed the spinning back kick to the nose. Just a bad stylistic matchup for Justin Gaethje. I think Ilia Topuria cleans him up. Like I said, in 2 rounds, definitely has the power, sharp jabs, in and out of the pocket. He beats the return. That's going to be coming back his way. And if Justin was struggling on the feet with Paddy Pimblett, not unable to put him away, I don't see a scenario where he's going to come out here and knock out Ilia Topuria. I think Ilia Topuria gets a KO first or second round. Really leaning on first. He's even saying the first, so I gotta trust the man at his word. He's lived, and he's lived up to his word to this point, and I really just don't see Justin Gaethje walking away with the W. So I like Ilia. I think we get Ann Still. I think we get Ann New, and I believe, actually, hot take here, I think the co-main event is actually going to be for the vacant heavyweight title. I think Tom Aspinall is going to relinquish, and we'll see a new heavyweight champion, because this is going on far too long. But that's neither here nor there. I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdowns. I definitely have fun. You see, I got the whole little outfit on. I had to take off the wig. I think I'm squeezing my brain, but I think we're gonna get a really historic fight card come Sunday, June 14th, UFC Freedom 250. I hope you guys like the breakdown. Please like, comment, share the video, subscribe, turn your post notifications on, because I already got the snipe of the week loaded. Obviously, we just lost this week, but we're coming back with some vengeance. We're coming back with a heavy play for UFC Freedom 250. So again, like, share, comment, and I'll see you guys on the snipe of the week. Peace out. White House, let's get it on.